Hello, the world of YouTube. How we doing? It's Wardy back with another YouTube cast. This one should be a cracking TvT, as we have to the top left-hand side our red Terran player. We've got FanTaSy up against the blue Terran. To the bottom right-hand side from Splice, TY. Welcome to the TvT, guys. How are we all feeling today? Hope you guys have been having a good week. Hope you guys have been having a good week watching Katowice. IEM has been absolutely spectacular. It's still going on when this video releases, so do make sure you check that out. I'm casting the B stream for the group stages and so on, so if you want to check that out, you definitely should. If you're watching this in the future and this doesn't apply to you, then I'm sorry for wasting 15 seconds of your life listening to me ramble on. Gonna waste another few seconds because I'm gonna be like, remember guys, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like on the video, don't forget to leave a comment down below, let me know what you're thinking of this TvT bonanza, and let me know if you want to subscribe as well. Hit that subscribe button and you can see when the other videos go up, which is very useful, believe it or not. Try and upload, well, we do upload daily, and we upload YouTube exclusives 3 times a week. So a bit of TvT here, and we start off on Kairos Junction for FanTaSy versus TY. And the early SCV scout from TY start to head out towards the upper left-hand side of the map here. So, sending this SCV towards the upper left. That barracks on the high ground here is going to finish up. A Reaper going to be on the way out. And FanTaSy just getting this set up and ready to go as we have the SCV of TY going to hop back up through the main base. Hang around up here. And we see the command center on the way down on the natural expansion from FanTaSy as well. So, getting that set up and ready to roll. This orbital command from FanTaSy is about to finish up. As on the other side of the map, it's a very different approach to the game. Double gas, although it has taken one worker out of each, and so TY will be able to go into an expansion here very shortly, but does have that much faster factory, and hence will have the more aggressive opener of the two. That said, because he pulls out of gas and will generally go in towards the command center soon, I think this build is generically a little bit disadvantageous to what FanTaSy is doing, because FanTaSy's factory is not that far behind, but his command center time is that much faster. Generally, the build TY does is very good against 1-1-1 aggression of your opponent, someone that goes double gas fully committed. What FanTaSy does is a bit of a risk against that, especially on this map where you have no ramp up into the natural expansion, so you've just got a low ground to attack. It just is a little bit of a riskier from FanTaSy, but it's going to be something that he gets away with. So, TY, not really going to be able to punish that all too much. What is interesting is the factory is going to swap onto the reactor now. So, actually wasn't building a Hellion at all initially. Now will build 2 to try and play catch-up from the fact that he obviously waited a little while. There is no second Reaper either, by the way, so there's a little bit troubling for FanTaSy. He will lose his first Reaper as well, going to be extremely reliant on those 2 Hellions. Good save on that SCV as the Reapers hop up into the main base. Hellion showing up now as well. SCVs have to pull. The grenade goes down to pop the SCVs around a little bit further. 2 Hellions coming down the ramp, and the Hellion of TY taking quite a lot of damage will go down. There's been 4 SCVs killed so far, and those Reapers are still alive. They'll probably get this kill on the low ground. 5 workers killed. Well, TY, I mean, this wasn't meant to happen, right? It was this was like the greediest you can get out of FanTaSy with that reactor coming down after the Reaper. And even then, he lost his Reaper. This really got out of control very quickly. So, TY actually picks up some very good early game damage. 5 workers killed. Going to be sitting at 25 SCVs to the 21 SCVs as the factory will start up the tech lab. So, factory getting the tech lab going. The Liberator on the way out here from FanTaSy as well in the main base. That's going to be done very shortly. There's a couple of Marines going to be popping out. And on the other side of the map, well, TY just now getting that starport up. Did delay this because, again, he was looking for that earlier command center, which is now on the way. All said and done, obviously FanTaSy's had a mule or so on his side. So if we have a look at this, there's actually still FanTaSy favored, and with the worker count evening up now, looks as though this game is going to go into a fairly equal economy, despite how much TY got done there early on. I'm a little surprised that FanTaSy was able to stay so stable in the economy, but I guess that is the difference of having that earlier orbital and just having the extra SCV production so soon in the game. Hellions will hold the high ground, the Cyclone will not push up theirs. FanTaSy does have a Liberator looking to harass here now in these early stages, coming around the bottom side of the map. Barracks on its way down in the main base, so continue to set this up as a stim pack upgrade. Will get started as well. The Liberator will siege up in the main base and get a couple of SCVs, just the one. But of course, forcing these workers off of the minerals and the gas is very nice. As the Cyclone of FanTaSy gets the kill on the Cyclone of TY. TY setting up for a little bit of a push. This Liberator going to try and reposition and just be a little bit annoying. Those Marines are running right into the Liberation Zone as well. This is annoying. This is so much mining time lost here. FanTaSy has a siege tank he can set up on the high ground here, but does not have it in position to deal with the tank on the low ground, which means this supply depot's in trouble, these couple of workers are in trouble, and a couple of those already going down. Tank repositions down to the low ground to try and hunt down those Marines, but the Marines should be able to get out of range. Again, that supply depot will fall, and these SCVs now will have to pull away. But as all of this happens, TY is still not mining because this Liberator is still set up, and there's no good way to deal with this. Probably the Raven and the Order Turret is going to be the answer, but well, that takes quite a while to set up into, so that's a huge amount of mining time lost from TY. And as soon as we see this cleaned up, we'll have a quick peek at the income tabs, just see where the players have been at. As obviously it's been a pretty complicated situation with all of these SCVs not able to mine. Yeah, look at that, FanTaSy very far ahead. That's very good for him, even though he had to pull a few SCVs away from this right-hand side of this mineral patch. Is now at that stage where FanTaSy should be able to break out of this. He's also going to have Stimpack finished in the next few moments as well, one Hellion leads the charge in, gets shot down immediately. No look at all right there, as we're going to be seeing a few Marines, a siege tank, loaded up into the medevac and going to start boosting away down to the bottom right-hand side. Couple tanks sieged up here from FanTaSy, picking off a Marine. Another tank coming in at the front, and those Marines continue to gather together. Scan up in the main base, medevac and a Viking popping out as well. Just seeing this army from FanTaSy continue to get set up to go right across the map as TY attacking his own medevac there for a moment was interesting. I mean, TY is still looking for a push, right? I mean, he's on a 1-1-1. He doesn't have extra barracks still. He doesn't really have any kind of follow-up to this. If he follows up from this now, I think he has to go mech, right? Because I just don't see a way he can get in this game playing bio when he's so late on the Stimpack, combat shields, and all those other upgrades. If Interference Matrix comes down, that will save FanTaSy TY from losing one of his tanks here, and he will have to get 2 tanks off FanTaSy. I mean, TY needs to do some major damage because his production setup is just so delayed, and FanTaSy has Stimpack for, you know, Christ's sake, like, that's so ridiculous. He's got Stim, and you look at what TY has, absolutely nothing. He just started Stim as combat shield starts from FanTaSy. That's over 2 minutes late. Oh, well, these Marines coming in from FanTaSy going to get some damage done. Oh, I thought that was units coming in to defend. It was actually just SCVs back up into the main base. Well, 3-4 workers killed already. FanTaSy finding some real damage here with this. Time to lift up and leave those. The units come in. Honestly, if FanTaSy just gets a big push going. The issue is the siege tanks. So you can't really attack into the siege tanks, Stimpack or not. Maybe with combat shields, there's some sort of possibility there as the TY Liberator gets found instantly by this Viking. The Viking will not get the kill on it, but it will push it away, so it shuts down that potential aggression. As FanTaSy setting up towards the front now, coming across the right-hand side of the map. That's a Liberator that gets some damage done over in the natural. 2 Marines simming forwards, and they will be able to take this down. 6 workers killed, though. And it's just ping-ponging the players backwards and forwards between that kind of 40 to 45 worker mark, and one player has the lead, then the other. Neither of them having a 3rd CC just yet. TY is about to finish. FanTaSy is actually on a 2-base attack here. Now that does concern me because I feel like FanTaSy has all of the advantages, but by 2-base in it, oh, I just don't see. I mean, if you're 2-base in it, you're in no rush to take your 3rd base as TY, so he's just going to sit here and have a pretty good time as the Marines drop on top of the siege tank. SCV's trying to repair. The Marines will get the tank, will get the SCVs too, and there we go, back and forth once again. The Marine counts trading now as well. But the SCV counts again, 45 now from FanTaSy, 42 from TY. They just keep going up and down around this 2-base saturation. One player leads by 5 workers here, then the other. As FanTaSy will hold off. Now, FanTaSy can build his 3rd base in position. That's one of the big things about having the map control like this. Will be weak if TY gets a drop-off, but does TY feel like he has the chance to get a drop-off right now? These guys are playing such different styles of Marine tank, it's actually ridiculous. This is just Marine tank medevac from FanTaSy, but TY obviously a lot more technical earlier in the game. And now he's very Viking Raven heavy as well, so he's got that air control. So it's completely different setups, and with this amount of Ravens and this amount of Raven energy, the amount of tanks you can matrix is insane. So that's worth keeping in mind here. But TY overall does have a smaller army. So while his army is maybe more technologically advanced, it's a bit more tech heavy, bit better overall, I would say. It is also a bit smaller, and that might just be the difference as well, especially with a move like this. FanTaSy is just going to go straight through the natural. Can he get to the main? Main base would have been amazing, could have denied combat shields, but the back of the natural works pretty good as well. As these Marines unload, they're a little bit stuck in behind the siege tanks. Liberator sieges up, Marines will come forward to get rid of the Liberator, so the air control not showing too much at the moment. The Vikings still getting rid of the Medivacs. FanTaSy's only killed 6 workers with this. There's another couple of interference matrices. I mean, you got to remember here though, TY is fighting without combat shields into this army. He's also fighting without +1 armor. So when it's Marines on Marines, it actually goes very well for FanTaSy. But those interference matrices absolutely clutch to be able to save this. Otherwise, those tanks from FanTaSy would have done so much here. As it stands, the army is actually traded out pretty evenly, maybe even a bit better from TY, because he went into this down on army supply and he comes out even. FanTaSy now setting up a siege on the right-hand side, so the action will continue. A few Marines stemming forwards, and we are going to be seeing the siege tank chase down a little bit. Some of the Marines on the high ground turning around to push that back. And the armory on the way up from TY in the main base. The combat shields is about to finish. And we are seeing those 3 Marines in the tank coming down the left side here, looking to gather on up. Viking from FanTaSy still out in the center of the map. FanTaSy with the third base down right now as well. +2 attack and armor upgrades, so that's something FanTaSy will also take the lead in. He already has +1 armor advantage, so he's only expanding himself in terms of what he has in his favor here. Marines will stem in, but it's just a lot of tanks. That's kind of the issue. It is just a lot of tanks out of TY as he continues to defend, but as he gets pushed away from the third base, he does have a counterattack on the third base of FanTaSy. I was going to say, but at the end of the day, FanTaSy's getting in a much better position for the longer game, and TY's setup is set to put him into the longer game, right? The tanks are there to keep him alive, and the air control does that too. So it's weird because TY is almost set up in such a way that he's designed himself to go into the later stages. But when he gets to those later stages, FanTaSy is going to have all of the advantages because FanTaSy is going to have the 2-2 upgrades faster. He's going to continue to have those upgrades. He's got his bases mining, so his economy is a bit better already. Yeah, this is starting to really slip into FanTaSy's favor from my point of view. But we are only one bad fight for FanTaSy away from having a situation where maybe FanTaSy loses all of his Marines, and if FanTaSy loses all of his Marines, then suddenly maybe TY can do something. If TY kills all the tanks somehow, because he still has the Raven, one of the 2 here still alive, so he can still matrix up a few tanks and maybe swing the tide of battle quite substantially. So it's definitely within reach for TY. I just like where it's going for FanTaSy, as we do see a single Marine spots this army coming around the top side. Marines of TY will respond, at least they'll start to move forwards. Thanks we'll see from FanTaSy, still has the upgrade lead, so in general should be pretty happy with this. The Raven comes forward, Marines want to get it. It's close, it will not go down. Marines taking damage from the tank on the high ground. FanTaSy still set up over here, loads up 1 Medivac as he scans ahead, realizes he can't drop on top of this. Could maybe drop through here if he can boost past that missile turret, because I think he will take some damage from it. TY actually just makes a play up through the center of the map as FanTaSy is out on the other sides. Well, let's see what happens. That Medivac can take a lot of damage from the missile turret, but will survive to hit the main base. This army up here will end up in a fight. FanTaSy had less Marines in the army, and so TY in a mobile fight is much better there. Here come the Marines now, though, running straight in, and obviously the 2-2 is finished against just +1 at the moment, so the upgrade difference is huge on the Marines for the moment. That is about to finish in the next few moments at least. Even these Marines trade surprisingly well, as TY's Medivacs in this top right side try to get away. 15 SCV is killed, and FanTaSy brings TY right back down to that 2-base saturation marker of about 46 workers. Obviously 44 being 2-base saturation with double gas. It's just not pretty, and I mean again, FanTaSy not letting anything up, goes straight into his next set of upgrades. So he'll be an armor upgrade ahead of the game for a little while as +2 finishes from TY. And then he's going to be going into the attack upgrade lead for a little bit as well. Marines stem in, they want these Medivacs, gets one of them. There's still a tank on the high ground. I'm surprised those Marines didn't go far enough forwards for more than one shot to go off. There's the Marines, tanks, and Medivacs from FanTaSy coming back around to the center. A few Vikings peeling away. And the Marines of TY up the center. FanTaSy sieges up the tanks. Marines from TY turn back around, and again, these tanks pretty well sieged up at the moment, so no real way for TY to go pushing through this. On the left side, this Liberator going to come down to the bottom left-hand corner. 4th base set up right here. Fantasy just trying to keep on expanding. Again, TY has been a bit faster to take bases, but that's not actually a fourth command center. It's his main base relocating. So relocating the fourth, I mean, that's the issue with that is always going to be you don't have a planetary fortress here. So you just really have to stretch out your defenses. I mean, that's fine if it's a larger attack, you need to do that anyways, but it means a drop is just so much more annoying because it takes more than usual to turn that away. Fantasy's still trying to push into this. I mean, the brute force kind of level of this from Fantasy is just crazy. The fact that TY has air control all of this time and is still being bullied around is absolutely crazy as Fantasy backs away once again. Just gets more and more Marines, more and more tanks on the way out. It's just an endless onslaught of Marine and tank from Fantasy. He doesn't care about teching up. Marines and tanks going to come on over to the right-hand side. TY, press forwards. Fantasy sieged up. Fantasy can work his way through those rocks. Then down to the bottom side, Fantasy will have a couple of medevacs which can fly in towards their space. A couple of siege tanks there, ripe for the picking. These tanks will unsiege. The Marines dropping on top of these tanks, and I mean, even if you just pick off a couple of these tanks, this is a pretty good trade already. We'll get that and SCVs to boot. And now it's just time to leave a few of the Marines surviving this engagement. It just feels like any moment now Fantasy's going to collapse in, especially because he's whittling down that siege tank count. It becomes easier for him to engage in. Tank's going to start sieging up, and you Fantasy, I think you just go for it right here. You got 3-3 against 2-2 as well, so those upgrades are in your favor on the Marines. But just right in here, and the third base has to lift. It will just be killed. A couple tanks on the high ground. Well, that's just nothing in comparison to all the tanks that Fantasy has. He can just wander forwards with these, siege them up. He should have no problem at all. We'll load up and just drop into the main base, actually. Shut down some of the production. Don't mind this idea. There's a couple tanks in position, but it's definitely a better fight than pushing up the ramp into the tanks. The Marines can just again spread out, and it pulls units out of position. Fantasy can trade pretty well. He does run up this ramp into tank fire now. Those Marines will go down. He's going to be cleaned up in the main base soon. I say he still has a few Marines running for him. These Marines want to jump on top here as TY is... Oh no, it's not even Marines, it's SCVs sacrificed. Oh no. Man, usually the Marines get dropped on, you're like, oh, good play. The SCVs just get sacrificed there. Well, Fantasy seen it coming in plenty of time. Was able to unsiege the tanks and minimize any friendly fire damage. Extra Marines showing up, continue to stim forwards. That one Liberator will not prove much of a problem. The tank count is now down to, well, actually 4 is still decent for holding the position. But when there's this many Marines, it just doesn't really make a difference. And the tanks just keep kind of brute forcing their way forwards. The Marines will stim up the ramp. I mean, the tanks are again going to be sieged up very soon for Fantasy, and then they are just going to be absolutely destructive as well. Truly, the brute force mechanism from Fantasy has absolutely worked in this game. It was fun though, because they really had a good back and forth earlier. In the end, Fantasy just having a bit too much here. His TvT looks terrifying. Honestly, like, his TvT looks like by far and away his best matchup lately. As that's GG's. Fantasy picks up game number 1 here against TY. This is a best of 3 series. I don't know if I mentioned that. So obviously we've got game 2 coming up. Let's just go straight into it and see if Fantasy picks up a 2-0. If TY fights back against that brute force Terran nature that Fantasy seems to have. Game number 2. We start off to the bottom right hand side of Port Alexander. This is our red Terran player, Fantasy. Top left, our blue Terran player from Splice. We've got ourselves TY here in this game number 2 of the best of 3. So excited to cast this next game. Again, Fantasy just looking awesome in that game number 1, didn't he? I mean, through and through just looked absolutely stellar. It was an absolute pleasure to watch. I loved it. I mean, there's just so many cool little moves, and TY did a very good job of playing from a little bit behind and playing defensively. But then there was them couple of moments when... There's the point when he had those Marines out on the map and he fought the Fantasy little dropship on the right side, and he was like, cool, this is a great move. And then Fantasy just comes in and cleans up like 24 Marines and 3 medevacs. He's like, well, thanks for the donation almost. And, you know, it just felt like that was the moment where TY was like, okay, well, maybe this is starting to work out for him. But no. As soon as that started to go right, Fantasy just shut it down, stomped it straight out, and yeah, crazy, crazy fun game number 1. I'm only excited to see what happens now going into game number 2. So I did a little bit of a whoopsie today, and before I recorded this video, I actually started recording another series before getting about 10 minutes into the game and realizing I've casted this series before. So that was a bit of a silly mistake by me. I did waffle on a little bit in that, and I want to just mention again, we're going to be doing a lot of IEM Katowice replay casts coming up in the near future. So stuff like, you know, I was just getting the games that weren't cast from the open bracket, maybe doing some of the group stage games that I didn't cast. I'm not sure if we'll do any of the playoffs, because I'm pretty sure you guys have watched a lot of the playoffs. But I would quite like to do some of the matches that I didn't get to cast, that weren't just, you know, that just weren't cast in general. So we'll be doing some of those. We might do a couple of the ones that were cast on mainstream and stuff as well, especially if they feature like Maru or Cyril or players we don't get to cast a lot. But I just want to ask you guys, of course, if you know, if you're a big YouTube watcher, what would you like to see me cast? You know, are you interested in some of the IEM series? Are you interested in matches that weren't cast at all before? Are you interested in, would you not mind if we casted something that was already cast? Let me know. I really really interested to hear what you guys have to say on the situations. Let me know about that as we do kick this off. FanTaSy chases down that SEV, and the SEV falls pretty quickly. We're going to be seeing the Reaper of TY and the Reaper of FanTaSy going up against each other. So the early game here in this TvT, it's mirrored build orders this time around, or at least a bit more mirrored than before. This time it is FanTaSy who's a little bit, slow on the expand, a little bit more tech heavy, but it's the exact same idea. So it's what we saw in game 1, just reversed. We see TY here actually did go straight into the reactor too, but it's not being punished anywhere near as much as FanTaSy was just yet, although that supply block has killed him because the CC didn't finish. Oh man, so TY supply blocks. I actually think FanTaSy should go up into the main base right now. Oh my god, FanTaSy doesn't realize the opportunity he has here. This supply depot is just so late. FanTaSy, he has absolutely no idea how good a position he could be getting himself into. He has absolutely no clue. Oh, what a shame. What a massive shame, actually, as we see the two Reapers and the Hellion still just fighting here. You see this little reposition. That's very cute as well. The Reapers, rather than being stacked up here, and here, stack up here and here, because units coming down the ramp, a Hellion down here is much more likely to attack in this direction, right? So just trying to minimize that splash damage. Is he going to get the cancel on the command center? Okay, I was questioning his choice to continue fighting the CC. Is it actually just the right choice? He backs away. It's still low. And obviously you can't repair it until it's finished building. He has the units to fight this, I think. He's being very careful about it. It is going to finish building. My gosh, though. It got so low. And he was delayed for a huge amount of time. He dives in, tries to get the SDV. The Hellions now TY, a bit too high in numbers, and will be able to fight back. In fact, chasing those Reapers will pick up some damage. Nice grenade, perhaps, as the damaged Reaper continues to run. The other couple of units turn around. Yeah, fun little micro war in the early stages of this TvT. Cyclone shows up, and we're just going to be seeing FanTaSy. Gets a shot off onto that Reaper. A couple of Hellions going to go chasing that Reaper down to the bottom side then. So Reaper will be hunted down as Hellions continuing to chase. There we go. The Reaper does get picked off. So the Reaper dies. Siege tank on the way out. A couple of extra barracks on the way in as well from TY. And we're going to see that barracks landing onto the tech lab here. Stimpack will start up, and the starport beginning to build a reactor. So starport beginning to build the reactors. We're just going to be seeing TY. Marines, Hellions, couple of Ravens. So a couple of Hellions and Raven hanging out already. TY is much faster on the Stimpack this time. We really have taken a fall and roll reversal from that last game. There's a couple of Cyclones locking on. That's 2 dead Marines at least. And then there's not much you can do when that siege tank gets sieged up, because the Cyclones die so fast to it as well. Knocks on once again here, but doesn't even get a shot off before he backs away out of range. Yeah, going into his own Raven, his own siege tank's coming up. His first Raven's already coming across the map. So what's he aiming for here? Interference Matrix the siege tank and then just dive in. Cyclones lock onto it. There's a possibility, although one of the Cyclones already in some trouble there. It's a nice unsiege. Unsieges before the Matrix, because once the Matrix comes down, you can't unsiege the tank because it disables that attribute from it. So by unsieging it already, you're actually able to micro it backwards while it's in the Matrix. You can move it, but obviously you can't move it if it's stuck in a siege. Couple Cyclones, Reaper back down to the bottom right hand side. The Raven and FanTaSy coming over to the left as well. Third CC getting started. And just going to be seeing FanTaSy playing some mech. This is kind of what I thought TY would do in that last game. It was like that point where TY was kind of so far behind for the bio upgrades and he was still in the 1-1-1. I was just convinced he was going to play mech, and I really think it was something that led him to really being a bit of a downfall when he tried to play bio, because his production on the Marines was late, and so he had to play a very defensive style, which FanTaSy abused in all of the right ways. He took the map control, he took the bases, and he didn't, you know, I still think TY's composition was good, but it wasn't good enough to get him back in the game. And TY just made sure, FanTaSy just made sure of that. So that's why I kind of thought it was going to be mech, because with mech, you're meant to be defensive, you're meant to sit back, and your opponent taking the map is kind of meant to happen. Been, you know, in a mirrored matchup, if you let that happen, you're obviously going to fall behind. So I was a little bit intrigued. We're going to see a few tanks getting sieged up here just down this ramp. Reaper from FanTaSy just patrolling down on the bottom, and we do see the Marine of TY coming up to the top. And then move around, come over to the right-hand side. Supply depot and the SCV just hanging out behind the mineral line. And waiting to see what is next. Is the +1 armor coming down. The combat shield's about halfway done. Again, just going to be seeing TUI on siege and a few tanks, gathering these units up together in the center. All of this pulling out into the middle to try and see what happens next. A couple of tanks from FanTaSy going to get sieged up. Vikings and a Raven hanging out overhead. I'm just going to be seeing a few more of these units just pressing forwards from FanTaSy. Just trying to see what's going on. As the Marines and tanks of TY going to be pressing through there. Oh my god, the Marines! TY just gets absolutely destroyed. Okay, well, FanTaSy very easily able to turn this away then as the Raven gets locked onto. Cyclone will push that all the way back as we see the +1 armor upgrade from TY also coming into play. Well, TY just nothing with the first push forwards, and I'm already a little bit scared. Like, I don't even know what's gone wrong. Is it just losing those Marines? Maybe. But FanTaSy is in a supply lead with mech against bio. Like, how is this happening? I don't know. SCV is going down as an auto turret comes in across the map. Now let's just take a quick look at these little bits and pieces. Just FanTaSy's had that little bit of an eco lead with that delay of the command center. That's so sick. Look how substantial that's been for him. Obviously some spikes later on as some SCVs get pulled away against certain things. And you can see FanTaSy's just slowly, again, mech a bit slow to build up. If you've got that eco lead, you're going to just take that lead overall. Raven comes in. It's got 5 kills so far, and it just continue to be annoyed with the auto turret. I guess with mech against bio, the Raven has less of a role to play. An anti-armor missile is nice, but generally the Marines are going to die anyways if there's siege tank fire on them. I don't think the minus armor is going to change too much about that. I might be mistaken. Maybe with certain upgrade differences. Howling's going to run in towards the 3rd CC. So, I've already seen a few of these SCVs getting picked off. 6 workers killed, pops into the high ground. 8 workers picked off here. Very close to making that 9. Go on, that SCV actually just wanted to die. I mean, this is just damage you can't really take as TY at this point in the game, right? Like, you're already trailing a little bit. Now you're losing workers on top of the deficit you already have. FanTaSy's army is getting to that point where 160, 170 supply is the magic command for moving out with a mech army. Because as you move out with a mech army, your mech army is very slow to rebuild. So if you lose a mech army and you were maxed out, you didn't have any units already building, and so again your next set of units is going to take a while to finish. If you move out with 160, 170 supply, your next production cycles are already started, so that by the time you trade, you have units back at home ready to go. It's going to be seeing the bio and TY hanging out to the right. It's going to catch a siege tank here. This FanTaSy just a little late to get those tanks sieged up to truly push this away. I just really feel we're like 30 seconds, a minute away from FanTaSy just pushing across the map, maybe even right now as it comes down this ramp. And I just look at the army of TY and I wonder, what is TY going to do to try and clean this up? A couple of tanks get sieged up already. Vikings and the Ravens sat overhead. A little bit of a bio up force, stims forwards. Vikings get chased away. Another couple of scans dropping down. Yeah, I mean, counterattacks, obviously, like attacking around this army, never really engaging it head on. Those little things are the kind of things you maybe should be looking at here. do see this little bit of bio and tank force coming all the way down in towards the center. Marine in the middle of the map gets cleaned up as well. Another Hellion morph into a Hellbat. Scan on top of this army. TY has been seen. It looks like FanTaSy wants to maybe try and take advantage of that. Vikings starting to come forward, gets a few shots off on those medevacs. Another scan up to the top side, and well, this army's still pressing forward, so you're going to see the Marauder locked onto. See Chang sieged up, supply depots getting taken down. Counter-attack from TY perhaps, looks like he wants to head down to the bottom right-hand side. These Vikings have to turn and wave the Raven as well. So those turn around pretty quickly here, as we see the Liberator on the way up from TY2. So getting that set to go. FanTaSy back through the middle of the map. Still set to fight. Scan comes down. Cyclone's going to start locking on. The anti-armor missile will connect. FanTaSy has now put himself in a position where pushing forwards is kind of just the natural route to go. Oh, big fight in the skies. TY has been sent up a little bit of an air army, but even with that anti-armor missile on the Vikings, it doesn't seem to matter because FanTaSy is just pressing forwards. The Liberators getting shot down before they get too much splash damage off. I think they didn't get any splash damage off at all. And the thing is, the ground army is obviously just disappearing for TY because these tanks from FanTaSy are putting in the work. That's GG. FanTaSy picks up game number 2 of this best of 3. GG's and very well played. I mean, a 6 series from FanTaSy, I think. I mean, game number 1, I think, a bit more entertaining. But game number 2, just a display of dominance when it came to the mech style. And just little fingers got him ahead, kept himself ahead, and just won the game out from there. GG's from FanTaSy. Takes that 2-0 over TY. And that wraps us up for today's YouTube exclusive. Make sure you check out TvT, guys, if you're watching this video on the cut day or two that it comes out. It's an amazing tournament. Definitely deserves to be watched. It's out on Twitch. Otherwise, I will hopefully have an upload for you guys on Saturday as well. And then then next week after that, it will be all about TvT replays. We'll be doing a bunch of those, so you guys can watch that. Again, if you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like on the video. Don't forget to comment down below. Let me know maybe what series you'd like to see from TvT, or just let me know what you thought of the TvT. Let me know what your favorite matchup is to see casted. If you don't want to give me a certain match, give me a matchup. And obviously subscribe to the channel as well. Let's push that 7,000 YouTube subscriber mark. Thank you so much, guys. See you next time.